Hi, I'm Femi OK, and you're in the stream. Today, it's a show first. We are going to the bottom of the world, Antarctica. We'll talk to scientists about what we can learn from one of the world's most inhospitable locations. I can't believe we're here. It has taken us so long to put this program together, months and months and months. There's only certain times of the year that we can actually even get a link up with Antarctica. Fingers crossed, touch wood, it's going to work out. Malika Bilal, what do you have?
My fingers are crossed.
All right.
And in honor of this day, we decided to have a Twitter chat. So our team chatted with Antarctic scientists and also students of science yesterday ahead of the show. We got lots of interesting discussion going on, questions and comments. And one of the tweets that got the most shares is here on my laptop. This is a phenomenon known as the Southern Lights. And you'll hear from one of our guests on the show whose base is there that you're looking at. Of course, we want you to send us your questions as well. Use hashtag AJStream.
So joining us right here in our studio, we have Scott Borg, and he travels yearly to Antarctica and is head of the National Science Foundation's Antarctic Sciences section. Scott, it's great to have you here.
Thank you here. I'm delighted to be here.
We are going to be hearing about your war stories, your research, your science, all about Antarctica in just a moment. So sit tight. We'll be back with you in a minute. But first, what compels scientists from around the world to live in one of the coldest, driest and windiest places on Earth? Considered the last pristine continent, Antarctica is a prime research destination for climate scientists, geologists and others looking for data that could help shape our future. Some of the rarities that you'll find there include ice that can tell us climate conditions from a million years ago, microorganisms that survive without sunlight and in extreme cold, and telescopes that can detect nearly massless particles from exploding stars. Scientists who've been there say it's like being on another planet. With us to talk about this, on the phone from East Antarctica, Lorenzo Moggio is a physicist and atmospheric scientist. He's part of the Winter Over team at the research station known as Concordia. From Indiana in the US, Carolyn Dowling is a geochemist at Ball State University. Her studies focus on Antarctica's polar desert. And in California, Slavik Tulicek is a glaciologist with the University of California, Santa Cruz, and he studies the behavior of the West Antarctic ice sheet. Good to have you here, Antarcticans. I just made up that word. Slavik, what do you have? What equipment do you have there that you can show and tell us? Because I know you've got some bits and pieces that have come back from Antarctica. Sure. Show us.
So,
leaning back.
Walking on up,
Yes.
you want to have a lot of grip. So you want to have pointy things like this ice axe that help you hold on to the slippery surface. But even better,
What is that?
Oh, that's the thing that you put on your shoes to make sure you don't slip. So those are crampons, yes? So even on very icy surfaces, you can actually grab onto the surface and hold on if you have this ice axe and two of these on your shoes.
Fantastic. Scott, do you remember that first time, that very first time in Antarctica?
Yeah, I do. It's cold, and when the wind stops blowing, it's very quiet. Quieter than you'd ever believe. And that's something a lot of people don't think about. Very, very quiet out in the field. Carolyn probably can relate to that in the dry valleys sometimes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Carolyn.
When it's not windy, it is extraordinarily quiet because there are no birds, there are no insects. There's barely any instrumentation or machinery making any noise. So yes, it can be very disconcerting.
Yeah.
Very interesting and very nice once you get used to it, but it can be a little disconcerting at first.
Do you kind of freak out slightly? Is it scary, first of all, when you hear nothing?
No, actually, it's not that bad. I am someone who startles with noise, so having no noise was actually quite nice for me.
Very nice. I'm going to show you a Google Earth map of Antarctica. We're going to roll it right now. And in that Google Earth map, you'll see somewhere called Concordia, down in the southeast. And in Concordia at that station, we have Lorenzo Moggio. He's in Antarctica right now. He's on a satellite phone. So Lorenzo, if you took us outside, what would it look like outside of Concordia Station? Lorenzo, are you still with us? All right, I come back to Lorenzo in a moment. Malika.
Well, earlier when we saw some of the tools that Slavik showed us, that led some people to wonder what it must take to prepare yourself to have to use tools like that. Maybe you've never used them before. So there's a tweet here from Anne who says, is their preparation almost like how an astronaut would prepare for an otherworldly experience, like landing on the moon? Scott, I'll give that one to you. Is it similar to that?
Well, in some ways, because you're going to a very, very remote part of the world, and when you go away from our stations, as Carolyn and Slavik do, you have to take everything with you. So you have to take your tents, everything you're going to live with, fuel to melt snow to make water, and then of course all the scientific equipment. So, and it depends. Slavik will take equipment to drill into the ice, and Carolyn will take equipment associated with, for instance, sampling water in some of the streams or lakes that occur. The streams flow for just a couple weeks a year. You have to take all that with you, and so you have to do a lot of planning ahead.
Sure. Slavik, I know when you're out in the tents and you're out camping and then first thing you do in the morning is make water. That sounds bizarre, but can you talk us through that?
Well, sure. I mean, that's just reality of life, that you're surrounded by water, but it's all in solid form. So you have to then grab snow from some area that is clean, and we reserve an area specifically for so-called snow mine, so that we go there with shovels and dig up snow every morning and bring it to tents and then start the process of melting snow into water, which is necessary for both drinking and cooking our food.
The coldness is really fascinating here. I've got a temperature conversion back here. Thank you very much for the online temperature conversion. Carolyn, give us an idea of an average temperature, and I'll put this in and we'll do a Celsius to Fahrenheit conversion.
Okay, in the Murda Dry Valleys, it can range anywhere from -14 Celsius to +6 Celsius.
All right, let me put -14 Celsius in here. -14. And that is 6 Fahrenheit. That's not that cold, Carolyn.
It's not bad when you have long johns on the whole time.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me just try. Do we have Lorenzo yet? Lorenzo. All right, Lorenzo is back. Fantastic. Yes. Lorenzo, if you took us outside of Concordia Station, what would it look like out there?
Of course. Here we are on a high plateau, Antarctic plateau, which means at 3,233 meters altitude above sea level. So the landscape around us is an infinite flat white landscape, basically all covered with snow. No mountains, so the weather is almost always good. The sun shines 24 hours during summer, and we have 3 months of no sun above the horizon.
All right. Very good. Malika?
You mentioned that sun shining. This is a question about what happens in summer. This is Han, who says Antarctic summer is 24-hour daylight, as you just mentioned. That can really mess with your sleeping rhythms, especially if you're in a tent. And this, of course, is from someone who has been to Antarctica, and she continues by saying it has the upside that you can work for 20 hours a day when the weather is good to make up for the blizzard days. So in 140 characters, it sounds pretty easy, Carolyn, but can you describe what that's like, how you decide when you're going to sleep in summer and when it's time to stop working, though 20 hours is a long time?
It is quite a long time. When I am in the field, we usually end up dictating our day by meals. So we get up, we have breakfast, we bring lunch with us, then we go back to make dinner, or someone else makes dinner for us, depending on which camp you're at. And then you go back to work again, and you basically have to make your time limit. If you're going to work 12 hours, that's fine. You just need to cut yourself off and go to sleep to start the next day again.
So let's talk a little bit more about the work, Scott, because we've described what it's like living there. But what about the research that you can do that you can only really do in Antarctica?
So there's well, thanks for asking that, first of all. There's a whole range of things. Antarctica, as Carolyn and Slavik have alluded to, and Lorenzo, it's a fantastic natural laboratory.
Sure.
And so looking at simple ecosystems in extreme environments is one thing that you can't do elsewhere. And there are people that are interested in that as an analogy for what conditions might be on Mars, for instance. You mentioned looking for neutrinos, and there's a new field of astrophysics that depends on an observatory at South Pole that's buried deep within the ice, and it depends on these nearly massless subatomic particles interacting with an atom and producing light that can be detected. But and then of course what Slavik has been working on is a hugely important problem, and that is, how is the Antarctic ice sheet changing and what's it likely to do in the future?
That's two good questions. Should we ask him?
Issue. I think you should ask Slavik.
Slavik, go for it.
Sure. I mean, it's a little bit depressing because it's all about potential negative impact. One way to think about the Antarctic ice sheet is that it is a kind of a natural hazard that has the potential to raise the sea level by up to something like 60 meters, which would, of course, flood a large portion of the continental area and render them uninhabitable for humans. So this is why it's been a long-term goal of glaciologists in Antarctica to understand the processes that control how fast this can happen, so that we can actually predict whether that's a matter of 100 years or a couple thousand years, that process can play out.
So Carolyn, for you, what's the biggest discovery that you've made while you've been doing your research in Antarctica?
I have been working part of a team called the MCM-LTER. I'm not a primary investigator on it, but I have collaborated with the researchers, and it's very interesting. I mainly focus on the lakes, or one of my projects were on the lakes, and it looks like Lake Vanda may actually have some groundwater input into it, which was something that people did not remotely think about a decade ago. So there might be some briny groundwater flowing through Taylor and Wright Valley, in the dry valleys themselves.
Lorenzo, it is winter time right now, or we're heading into winter time for you, which means that for 6 months it will be dark. How do you do any kind of research in the pitch black?
If I understood right, I'm here since last November. Okay, I'm calling on Skype. So maybe.
Yeah, we see you. We see the Skype picture.
Now?
Yes.
I hope so.
We see your suit behind you. Tell us about the winter time and researching in the dark.
Okay, can you hear me here?
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, very good. That is much better. So, one important thing concerning the climate, it has been done here in Concordia and Sea. It has been the biggest ice core ever drilled. It has been a European project called Etica, which has been able to reconstruct temperatures and greenhouse gases concentration for the past 800,000 years.
Wow.
Which means we did the ice core 3,200 meters deep in the ice. We understood how were temperatures in the past and the concentration of some gases like carbon dioxide, for example, and methane. And we have been able to see that these two things are linked, are correlated. And as you probably know, the majority of scientists affirm that global warming is a consequence of the increase in carbon dioxide emissions.
Right, Lorenzo,
in the atmosphere.
we've been looking at some of the beautiful pictures that you sent us. Thank you for that. And I can tell you that Carolyn and Slavik and also Scott had broad grins on their faces. They were looking at these beautiful pictures from Antarctica. Malika?
And of course, as he was telling us about the work he does and how it affects all of us, there's a question here that I'll direct to you, Slavik, similar to that, pivoting off of that. This is Mustafa, and he says, how would the research on the Antarctic continent serve immediate scientific needs on other continents? And I know you've already touched on climate change, but are there other ways that the work you all are doing really affects people everywhere else?
Sure. I mean, certainly climate change is the most immediate impact that we have. I will be going to a workshop on sea level rise in a couple of weeks, and we have people collaborating with Antarctic scientists who are actually worried about the exact impacts of sea level rise, say here in California or Oregon or on the East Coast, so that we are jointly looking at what will happen in Antarctica and Greenland, as well as how that's going to actually in detail play out along the coast of United States.
So can I add a little bit to that? So one of the things that, again, as a natural laboratory kind of environment, there's a lot of research in trying to understand how organisms have adapted to the cold conditions and that sort of thing. And a couple of examples of research that does relate to human activities is some research on fishes that live in water that's so cold that their blood ought to freeze. But it doesn't freeze because they produce a protein that prevents ice from growing in their bodies. And it turns out that that has the potential to in human systems to prevent crops from freezing, for instance, or to be used in organ preservation for organ transplants and things like this. But there's also some real interesting research that's been done on seals to understand how they manage carbon dioxide production from their muscles that's related to a human condition, unfortunate, called sudden infant death syndrome. So there actually are ties between basic research that's done in many places of the world, including Antarctica, and things that are hugely important to human society on a shorter term.
See, I asked you earlier, what would you be doing today if you weren't spending time with us on the stream? And you said I would be looking at grant applications to go to Antarctica. So what research would you absolutely go, yes, green light that looks amazing? I mean, obviously, if you're watching right now and your proposal's on Scott's desk, I mean, this is not necessarily, definitely going to happen, but what makes you excited?
Well, this is where I have to be careful because you're almost like saying, well, which is your favorite child?
Yes.
When you have many children.
Which is your favorite child?
Yeah, so I don't know if I'll answer that.
Right.
There's a lot of different things, and it depends on the field. But the things that make me excited about are scientific projects that can break new ground.
Yeah.
And whether that's in physics or astrophysics or whether that's in glaciology, or whether that's in understanding the ecosystems and things Carolyn's working on about understanding how carbon cycles through the lakes and things like that. How do organisms survive? When there's a chance of learning something new, that's the thing that makes me really excited.
I'll share one example of something that excites one of our community members who's also been, this is from Anthony, he says, the hole in the ozone layer, which is still there and still huge, was discovered there. And I know in our research in doing this show, Slavik, we read some things about that hole and whether or not it is getting bigger or smaller. Can you talk to us about that?
Well, my understanding is that it is
yes,
getting
of
smaller.
course.
Thanks to the international agreement that basically dealt with the chemicals that were responsible for destroying the ozone in the upper atmosphere. So actually, that's a very nice example of how Antarctic science had an international impact on political agreements and then actual behavior, industry behavior that led to a positive result.
Lorenzo, you wanted to add something. Go ahead.
I wanted just to say that this is, as Slavik pointed out, this is a good example, and I hope the same. This will be followed by something similar concerning carbon dioxide emission. An attempt has been done with the Kyoto Protocol, but a lot of nations still didn't sign it, so we're not at the same state of the work. Concerning the impact on human societies and human beings out of Antarctica, I can tell you that, for example, here we are considered as a space analog, and the European Space Agency is conducting research on to understand human adaptation to harsh conditions, from psychology to the existence of bacteria living here, trying to understand if it's possible to have life, something living here, which at the moment is not still clear, and we have no evidence. But this can influence, of course, under the understanding of for example, sleeping problems in everyday life, for example. Since here we have different day-night cycles, and understanding the mechanisms which conduct to problems with sleeping here can maybe solve some problems even in societies, in Western society as well, out of Antarctica.
Fantastic. I should say it's about 4 a.m. in Antarctica right now. So thank you for getting up early or staying up late
now
for
it's
us.
4 a.m.
4 a.m. Okay. You're looking good on it. Head back here to my map. I got a map here of Antarctica. Let me just show you where Lorenzo is right now. This is where Lorenzo is sitting, right here. But you see all of these national flags around the coastline. I'm just wondering, Carolyn, do all the nations and the researchers, the scientists, do they play nicely together, or is it extremely competitive what you're doing?
It is competitive in terms of getting funding from the national, their version of the NSF.
Yeah.
It's competitive in that way. But once you get down to places like McMurdo or the Dry Valleys or the South Pole or Palmer, the scientists really get together and they help each other out. We're there for a very limited amount of time.
Sure.
And so if something goes wrong, you really are dependent on someone else to help you out. And it's very much tit for tat. You really do help each other out.
Sure.
It's quite an amazing community to be in.
When you say limited amount of time, are you talking a couple of weeks here? Because once it hits winter, you're stuck for 6 months. So in the summertime, you're in and out. How long do you have?
Well, it depends on your project. My shortest time was about 6 weeks. My longest time was 10 weeks.
Okay.
So yeah, it all depends on your project.
All right.
So science is very competitive. Don't want to.
I know. I saw you smiling when I said that. He was like, oh, I could tell you some stories.
And so from my perspective, I see science is very, very competitive.
Who's the worst,
But,
Scott?
No, but one of the things that I find fascinating is that, particularly in Antarctica, that's governed by a treaty.
Yes.
Because it's almost 10% of the continental crust of the Earth.
Right.
So but it's under a treaty. No one owns it.
Owns it.
No one owns it, not even technically.
All right.
Yeah, no one owns it.
Okay.
It's reserved for science. And one of the things that I find fascinating is that there are many opportunities where scientists from different countries can work together and can accomplish more than any one group by themselves. And so it's really fascinating, I think, to facilitate international collaborations that get at some of these very, very important problems. And there are many countries that are supporting scientists that are working on this problem of what's going to happen with the ice sheet. There's a lot of different countries that are supporting atmospheric sciences like Lorenzo. And then they meet when they're not in Antarctica, they get together and have scientific meetings and drink a little bit of beer and tell each other what they've learned, and we learn more because of it.
All right.
So I don't know, maybe Slavik or Lorenzo would want to comment on that.
I would want to jump in and say that even the competition that exists, and there is a competition at some level, is very constructive competition. We more kind of learn from each other because the process of making new knowledge is really, really difficult. And, by kind of looking at what somebody else is doing and learning from that, we are really benefiting all around, everybody involved in the process.
Sure. There's one little detail that I would be remiss of me if I didn't share on the main TV show, and that is what goes into Antarctica must come out of Antarctica. Carolyn's going to share a war story with you. Your war story is what, Carolyn? Very quickly.
So in the McMurdo Dry Valleys, it is a very fragile ecosystem, so you must do carry in and carry out. So if you're out in the field all day, you have to have your pee bottle, you have to have bags. So you basically do what you need to do, and you pee in the bottle. Women, it's a bit of a practice to get it right. And then you bring it all back to camp or back into town for processing.
All right. How's the international audience been reacting to this conversation?
This is something I'm going to tease us for the post show because it's a question I want all of our guests to answer. It's from Renuka, who says, first of all, great lineup. What was their single most unforgettable memory? We'll get it in the post show.
And the post show is at stream.aljazeera.com. See you online. Thanks for watching, everybody. Hey. Welcome back. Scott is a really great person to have just sitting to one side. He's just telling me about how competitive the science is, but in a good way.
Yes,
What's happening in Antarctica.
constructive. Slavik talked about this earlier.
Yeah.
It's a constructive competition.
Right.
And being able to facilitate research where international scientists come together.
Yeah.
Lorenzo's at a station that's jointly run by the French and by Italians, and there have been US collaborators that have worked with French and Italian scientists at Concordia. So, but that sort of thing, it's fascinating because it brings different perspectives. You know, scientists are like, you know, we're all human. We have different perspectives that we get from our cultural upbringing, from our educational upbringing. And those different perspectives are real important to bring to bear on these scientific problems. At least that's what I think. So Lorenzo or Slavik or Carolyn?
Yeah, hold tight 1 minute.
I think
Go ahead, Lorenzo.
I just want to drop a line. I mean, I agree with Scott completely, and I think science, even if it's competitive, it's open to discussion much more than different fields, because you have always to bring evidence, scientific evidence, and I think usually scientists are more keen on change their point of view if it's science-based. I mean, of course.
Right. You all speak the same language as science. Will you recap that tweet that we had and be going into the post-show?
Of course. This is from Renuka, who loves all of you, loves our lineup today, and she wanted to know, Renuka wanted to know, what was the single most unforgettable memory of working in Antarctica? So I'll start with you, Slavik.
I guess I would have to pick one of these long storms, windstorms that happen when you are out there outside of a station and sleeping and living in tents. And if you have 3 days of 50-mile-an-hour winds, everything is flapping and it's noisy, and you're trying to sleep at night in a tent that feels like you're sleeping in a jet engine. And then you go to a tent where you're cooking and all shaking, and it just kind of gives you the feel of this little fabric separating you from this really hostile environment. And that your life and everybody's life around you depends on that little thin fabric to protect you from that ferocious wind.
See, Slavik, I've got a photograph here of you and your team. It's an amazing photograph. Can you take us back to when this was taken?
Oh yeah, this is one of the seasons when we were drilling down to the bottom of the ice sheet to make measurements that are relevant to this sea level rise story, and also looking for life beneath ice.
Right.
And we have there a mix of scientists and also technicians and drillers, a very diverse group of people that was required to make that project a success.
Sure. Caroline, what's your greatest memory from Antarctica?
One of my more interesting memories has to deal with the katabatic winds that Slavik was talking about. I was in the valleys only for a short period of time. I had to get my sample, so it took us over 2 hours to walk just a mile against the wind to pick up samples. And then it took us another 2 hours back just to walk a mile. And you got dirt in your ears, your mouth, your eyes, even if you're completely covered up, which is what I was. It was quite amazing.
Now, is that amazing good or amazing horrific?
It was amazing tiring. I was very exhausted after that.
Lorenzo, you're still in Antarctica, so you may be still building the most amazing memory, but so far, what is the memory that will always stay with you from your time in Antarctica?
So this is my second year here, so I can count on almost 2 years of experience on the Antarctic plateau. And from a natural point of view, I can tell you that the most astonishing memory is walking at night, a 24-hour night, under the most beautiful sky I've ever seen, painted with stars and sometimes colored by the southern lights or aurora australis. From the human point of view, for me, the most amazing thing has been collaborating and living together with 13 people for 1 year long, French, Italian, in a station managed by the Italian and French Antarctic programs. And for example, this year we have one Swiss, one English, 5 Italians and 6 French, and this is amazing. This is really a good example of collaboration between nations worldwide in the name of science.
Certainly is. Scott, for you. So many memories. Can you pick one?
Yeah, so I'll pick one. There are a lot of memories, but I remember one storm that went on for 5 or 6 days. And it was really after the storm stopped and all our little dome tents were all sort of bent over. But going outside, and it was still, going outside and seeing the landscape covered with fresh snow, so you couldn't see tracks anywhere, and pristine, and the sun's out, and it was just spectacular. And we were maybe 400 or 500 miles from anywhere, any other people. And that will remain really special to me.
I want to share a favorite memory from someone on Twitter. This is Veronica. She says, my best encounter, 2 hours of watching emperor penguins frolic at the edge of the sea ice, magnificent birds. And of course, so many people think of penguins when they think of Antarctica. So this is Michael Hopper, a former member of the stream team, who wants to move it on a little bit forward from penguins. He says penguins are super visible, but is there a species that is an indicator of Arctic health? Which is, I love that question, Slavik. I'll give it to you because I know that you work with microbial organisms. Might that be one that tells us about the health of Antarctica?
I think that the microbes that I was involved in studying were mostly deep down beneath the ice sheet, kind of protected by the layer of ice from the immediate changes in climate. So those microbes are kind of removed physically from the driving forces of climate, but their environment is dependent. You know, they live beneath the ice sheet, and if the ice sheet starts to go away, then that will be a big ecosystem change for them.
But there is, if I could jump in, there is.
Please.
So fishing is allowed in Antarctic waters, and one of the concerns, and scientists know that fishes in cold environments don't reproduce as fast as fishes elsewhere. And so there's a lot of concern about the level of fishing and whether that will be destructive to the fisheries and that sort of thing. So that might be a little bit of an indicator species. But this is, again, one of those things where science is interesting because there's a lot of concern for how ecosystems are changing in the Arctic, where you have land surrounding an ocean, and you don't have a big ice sheet sitting on top of things. But this is, it's important to understand both polar regions, to understand how the Earth works as a system. And I suspect that Slavik and Carolyn and Lorenzo would all agree with that.
See, I didn't want to bring this up in the main show because it's a little personal, but not anybody can go to Antarctica. You do have to have tests and some kind of evaluation as well to make sure that you're suitable to go. Caroline, what do they do to you? Or what do you have to prove?
Well, NSF contracts out with someone, and they do we get a medical packet. So Scott, myself, and Slavik all have had to fill out this medical packet.
Yeah.
And they want your entire history, extensive blood work, dentistry, things like that. You don't need your wisdom teeth taken out anymore. You don't need your appendix taken out anymore.
I was told that story just the other day. Somebody told me you have to have your wisdom teeth taken out because you can't have dentistry if you're stuck there for 6 months. He was just scaring me, right?
Yes, no, that's not required anymore. So
Okay,
that's
anymore. Nice. That's a really important word in there.
Yep.
Used to have.
Used to be.
Did they do that to you?
No.
Okay.
But I have not stayed down there for the winter time. I've only been down there in the summertime.
All right.
But we don't want to have we want to have people that will go down there and will be healthy while they're working because it's so expensive to move people around.
But physically and mentally healthy as well.
And mentally, that's correct.
I'm going to bring in Lorenzo here. Lorenzo, because you've been there you're coming up for 2 years. Half the time it's dark, half the time it's light. What mental capabilities do you need to have to stick that out?
The thing here in Concordia is that you are isolated, completely isolated for 9 months, which means that no vehicle, no plane, nothing can reach you during these 9 months, even in case of extreme emergency.
Oh.
So it's very important to have medical examinations and be fit, not having problems. So you underwent, of course, a very strict examination, which is almost the same of astronauts. This year, for example, we had a Skype call with Samantha Cristoforetti, first Italian woman astronaut on the International Space Station, and it was fun because she said, "If I will be sick, I can come home. You cannot for 9 months."
Yeah.
So we are scanned from a medical point of view, from a psychological point of view before signing the contract. And we had also 1 week of training, human behavior and performance training held by the European Space Agency in Germany, where we learned how to cope with, to form a team, to work well together, to avoid and not concentrate on personal problems, but always trying to keep in mind the common goal and the common objective.
Sure. Can you imagine if you
really important.
Can you imagine if you were stuck out there for 9 months with a really irritating colleague? What would you do to them? Ha! So many thoughts.
You have to practice some meditation or you can just go outside and feel minus 80 degrees centigrade. So this helps to cool down.
I am now thinking of not suitable for work questions for all of you, so I think this is a good time to wrap up the conversation. Malika.
I'll leave us with a comment from someone who will reiterate why he thinks it's so important that we have scientists working there. He was there himself, and why it's so beautiful. This is Anthony Lister. Have a listen to what he had to say.
As an engineer with the British Antarctic Survey, it was my job to help keep the base running in the harshest of conditions. Now, I'm biased, but I believe Antarctica is the most beautiful and stunning place on the planet. Now, the research that goes on down there happens in part because it is so beautiful, because it's so unspoilt. There's no pollution, there's no fighting, and there's no scrambling for resources. That research, from marine biology to the study of space weather, shows what can happen when nations work together in pursuit of knowledge, something I hope continues for a long time to come.
And so do we, mostly for the purposes of this show, part 2.
Thank you very much to Scott Borg, Lorenzo Moggio, Caroline Dowling and Slavik Tulacek. It has been a fascinating half hour. We really appreciated your time, your comments, your memories, your war stories. Take care, everybody.